What's the most important Jewish value that we can give our kids? Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, where we talk about real life issues and tease apart what's true and what's not to give you the inspiration to upgrade your everyday lives. Okay, so here's a nice, easy question for a Wednesday night, middle of the week when our brains are all wide awake and everything. What do you think is the most important Jewish message to give to kids? Our kids, other people's kids, if anyone that doesn't have kids. But what would you say is the most important message, Jewish message, to give to kids? I see a smile.
To have a soul.
Sorry?
I don't know how you would convey it, but everything's to do with the soul. So it's soul and like the heart.
Okay. Soul, heart. Okay. What would you say? Well, you said be kind. Well, I saw a smile, so I feel like there's going to.
Mitzvahs.
It's difficult because you say Jewish.
Yes, I did say Jewish.
I think that's the difficulty because it's hard because what ties into what and what's what. If that makes sense.
What do you mean by that? I think you're onto something. Oops, sorry, I'm just moving this around, but hopefully that's better.
Like for me personally, it's about kind of everything you do, doing it with joy and like happiness and trying to make most of everything. But I can't think of how it would connect to Judaism. I'm sure there is something.
Well, I mean, let's tease apart what you said. You said to do everything with joy. Would you say the same thing applies to Judaism? You're not sure though.
It's not necessarily because there's that thing that you do it because you have to, you don't necessarily want to.
Gila, would you say it's about doing things for other people, not about yourself, to feel good? But I don't have to portray that in a childlike way, like to do things for your friends and it's like a natural thing, like within.
Okay. No, I hear that.
There was a concept giving comes to loving, isn't there? I can't remember where it comes from.
There is a concept that giving comes to loving. That my daughter and her friends having a birthday party that is no children were harmed in the process.
That's a Jewish message.
That is a Jewish message, apparently. She asked me, can I have my daughter, she's 13, she has, hello. No worries, it's a very interrupted, whatever, we're gonna keep moving. Do you want to take, please? So it's just before my 13-year-old said to me, can we use the garden to have a party for my friends? And I was like, sure, but you've got to be quiet because I've got a class night. She's like, sure, no problem, I'll be quiet. So this is quiet. Okay, so what we have so just to sum up where we were up to, we're talking about what do you think is the most important Jewish, and I did use Jewish, message to give to our kids. So I want to say is that we've got a few answers on Instagram which are good as well, which one is that Hillel's message of not doing to others what's most painful for you. Okay, this person is obviously knowledgeable, that she's telling us the story about when Hillel was told that don't do to others what you do to don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. That's one. And tell them the things you see are not the way they are, and the way they are not seen. Okay, tell them that there's a depth beyond the surface. Community and tradition, that's a good one as well. Nicole, what would you say the most important message to give to kids? Jewish message though. You're muted. Thinking.
Putting me on the spot.
Yes, I am, sorry.
I like the one that you've just covered. I think that's something that I would have probably put forward.
The community and tradition, or the...
No, don't do to others what...
To others. That
I was thinking that.
How about not everything is what it
not everything. So that's similar to what that person wrote on Instagram, and I apologize that I can't remember who it was that wrote it. But that there's a layer beyond, which I think is actually a very, very important message to teach, especially in the world of social media, right? Where we think we see everyone else's lives, but there's a depth beyond that we're not seeing. So that is definitely also very, so okay, there's some really, really great answers. So what I want you to do is keep that question. Anyone who thinks of themselves as a Jew, okay. I want you to think of that, keep that question in mind, and we're going to get back to it right at the end. In the meantime, I want to ask you another question. So Judaism, according to Jewish law, is passed down through the mother. Any idea why? Why would it be through the mother and not the father?
Mother may be the one who teaches the children.
Okay.
You always know who the mother is.
So Lindsay, you're actually raising a very good point, and one of the reasons that's given is because you always know who the mother is, right? You may not know who the father is, but you know who the mother is. But it's not a complete answer, and I'll tell you why. Because firstly, in Judaism, there's always, as we said, that there's that layer below. There's always that layer below, right? There's always the depth to it. So it can't just be a practical thing because we know who the mother is, but we don't necessarily know who the father is. And there's a second reason also why that can't be the complete one, because the tribal part of it, right? In times of the temple, even today, right? Who was a Kohen or a Levi, who was a priest or a Levite is decided through the father. That gets passed down through the father, right? The customs is generally through the father, but the thing is through the mother. So what we're going to see, and what I want to tease apart tonight, and then sort of wrap up with what perhaps the most important thing to give a child, the most important Jewish a message to give a child is to talk about there's differences in a male responsibility, in a male role, and the differences in a female role. Okay, now we just had Purim, and there's a slight difference when it comes to reading the Megillah in the obligation on a man and the obligation on a woman. Okay, so the primary obligation for a man is to hear the Megillah, right? Sorry, is to read the Megillah, right? He can fulfill his obligation by reading it as well, by listening to it as well, but primarily it's the man that reads it, right? The woman, on the other hand, has the obligation to listen to it, right? That's primarily how she fulfills her obligation. Now, what you have here is you have the same story, the same Purim story that happens. The Jews were in trouble. They were saved. And yet there's like a difference in the way that there's a slight difference in the way that a male is supposed to respond to it versus the way a female is supposed to respond to it. Okay. Now, the question is why? So what I want to show you is that there are two different parts of our identity. Okay. Now, this is where the title of the class comes into. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? How do we identify with ourselves? And without getting personal, right? Okay, let me clarify the question a little bit more. There are two different ways of how we look at ourselves, right? We see ourselves by what we do, right? We can think of ourselves by, whatever my profession is. I'm a mum, I'm a sibling, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a giver, I'm musical, I'm artistic, etc. Like we can classify ourselves, we can identify ourselves by what we do. But there's a different part of our identity as well, and that is who we are. Okay, now you look at, let me ask you the question. If I were to ask you the question of what you do, anyone wants to respond to that? What do you do?
That's an extension of you.
Okay, but just to answer the question.
Do you mean your job? What do you mean?
What comes to mind when I ask you that question? Okay, so just tell me what. Give me an answer then. If I was meeting you for the first time at a party and I said, hi, I'm Gila, what's your name? And then I would say to you, so what do you do? What would you say? You say your job, right? You know, whatever it is that you do, right? Or you know, if you're a business owner, right, a manager at a doctor's office, or if you're a business owner, you know, you might say that, a teacher, etc. We've got some answers there. You may say, I do nothing. I do, right? I do everything, and I don't get paid. That's basically what you would say. I remember whatever, I'm going off on a tangent here, but like the first time I had to fill in that I was a stay-at-home mom, because for a certain period of my life I was, and I felt like it was such a demeaning thing to write. But the truth is, it's absolutely not. Like, it is so difficult. It is so difficult. Yes, it is so difficult. And you're like raising a human and you feel like you're doing nothing, but whatever. Anyway, we digress, right? Housewives do everything 100%. They deserve greatest respect. Okay, now if I were to ask you, who are you?
I am the daughter of.
The daughter of, okay. Anyone else wants to respond by who are you? It's a hard question, no?
That's more about your character. What defines you internally, and then the job is external.
Okay, so we have Abby who says she's a Jew. Anyone else wants to respond to who are you? I'm a mother. Okay. A wife. Yep.
Work in progress.
A work in progress. Although that might be a little bit what we do.
Yes. Yeah.
I would have said like the family name, so like my surname, like that's like someone said the daughter of. That would be my thoughts.
Interesting.
Or where I was from, like the area.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I mean I'm British, but I would never say that. Like if someone would ask me who I am, maybe I'm a Jew or whatever, I wouldn't say I'm British, but I think it's just because I'm not very patriotic towards the UK. But I wouldn't say I'm Canadian as well. I've got Canadian citizenship as well, but I don't know. I don't feel like I have a.
No, I wouldn't. Let's say like I'm from England or from the UK. I would say like I'm originally from Liverpool, because I actually don't live in Liverpool anymore. So that's where my association would be, because everyone wants to know your family history and your connection. And
I think it's like the British people. Like if we were sitting in the States and having, I don't know if there are people from America on it. I think like the British are not very patriotic. Like one of the things I noticed when we lived in Canada, we went to visit the States, like their people are like, they're American, right? They're American. Whereas here it's like, yeah, I come from the UK, you know. Occasionally we have some sunshine or whatever it is, right? So there's basically these two parts of our identity, right? There's what we do, but there's a deeper part of it is who we are. And we're going to see that these two parts of our personality, these two parts of our identity are portrayed in different ways in Judaism, right? Because what's very, very important to bear in mind is that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, regardless of how they behave, right? Regardless of what a Jew does, right? Regardless of how the Jew feels, like what I'm doing and how my doing is affecting me, they are a Jew, even if they sin. Even if they sin not, they are still always a Jew. So there's that deep level of identity as being a Jew, regardless of what they do. And we see this in so many different ways in Jewish law and Jewish thoughts and Jewish practices, how we have the two different parts. Well, I'll give you a few different examples, right? So for example, there's tefillin, which is, I don't know what the English word for it is, but you know, it's got two parts. It's got the part that men put on the head, and it's got the part that they put on the arm. Now, the arm is always symbolic of what we do, right? Because if you think about it, we use our hands to do stuff in the world. And when it says you should tie it on your hand, right? As a verb, you should tie it. But then when it talks about the tefillin, the one that goes on the head, it says, and those should be on your head, right? And again, the head is more symbolic of who we are, right? You know, so it's again, it's those two different parts of our identity. There's the part of what we do, right, which is symbolized by the tefillin of the hand, and there's the part of our identity of who we are, which is symbolized by the tefillin that goes on our head. And we see this similarly, that there's two types. Sorry, there's two types of anti-Semitism as well, right? Anyone can guess where I'm going with this? What types of anti-Semitism are there?
Jews hating Jews.
Like mental and physical.
So no, there's not. It's not mental and physical. What? I mean, could be, but there's two different types of reasons why people hate Jews, right? There's and we can trace the roots. There is the Hanukkah type of anti-Semitism, where the Greeks didn't mind the Jews, right? Their hatred towards the Jews was not hatred towards the Jews per se, it was a hatred towards Judaism, right? They said, you Jews will be safe as long as you don't practice Judaism, right? You practice Judaism, we will kill you, right? So that's like one type of anti-Semitism where it's a hatred against being Jewish. Sorry, not being Jewish, doing Jewish, being Jewish.
Being Jewish.
Second type of anti-Semitism, which was the Purim story, which and the Holocaust, for example, Nazis, they didn't care how religious or irreligious a person was. They didn't care how much you practiced Judaism. If you're a Jew, they hated us and they wanted to kill us, right? And we see this in the way that we celebrate both Hanukkah and Purim, right? How do we celebrate Hanukkah?
The lights.
By lighting, by doing. We take them in our and we right to show that you cannot stamp out Judaism, right? We survived and we will continue to do Jewish. But there's a second type, but Purim, how do we celebrate? We celebrate by listening to the Megillah, by you know, there's a concept in getting drunk, which is very often overdone. It's that yeah, you can actually fulfill that mitzvah by drinking just a little bit, and you know, you're resting for a few minutes, right? It's overdone. But again, what is it? It's we celebrate by being, right? Because the Haman didn't care how much or how little we practiced Judaism. They hated us because we were Jewish. The Holocaust, the Nazis were exactly the same. They didn't care, right? It wasn't that someone that was religious was safe and someone that was not safe, or vice versa. You know, they wanted to kill all the Jews. So we celebrate that by just being Jewish, right? Now, generally, what there's a male energy and female on the other side of the spectrum, and most females have more female attributes, and most males have more male attributes. But what the male attribute is much more of that drive to do, to achieve, to right, whereas the female attribute is much more the attribute of being. Right. So how does this show is that when it talks about what the father's role in teaching the children and what the mother's role is in teaching the children in Judaism, it says that the father teaches, you know, it tells the child, listen to what your father tells you to do. Right. And the mother teaches us how to be, right? What to be. And again, it's this topic of male and female energy is much bigger. I'm happy to go into it in detail in another class, but another session. But what I wanted to really show you is that there's these two different parts of our identities that have to be developed. There's that part of doing, and there's the part of being, right? And the male energy is much more that energy of doing, right? Which is why, incidentally, in Judaism, a man the primary obligation to study Torah just for the sake of studying Torah is on the male, because his job is to do. Whereas a woman's role is to be, right? Is to instill that sense of I am a Jew, and I'll always be a Jew, and no, regardless of what I do today or tomorrow, I will always be a Jew, right? And that's why when you go back to the Megillah, the man has to read it out, but for a woman, she has to listen, because that's much more, a role of just being. So go back to the original question that we started with, and that is, what Rav Hutner, who was rabbi that lived, I don't know, 50 odd years ago or so, was once asked, what is the most important Jewish message to give to a child? And the answers you all gave at the beginning, you're all right? The kindness, the community, the tradition, they're all right. But I would say in order for any of that to be successful, we have to give our kids a reason. And that reason is a pride in being Jewish, right? Because when we give our kids, and when we ourselves have that pride to be Jewish, then we'll want to find a community. We'll want to understand the traditions. We'll want to connect to the Jewish values, right? Because if a child, and we talk about a child, but the truth is it's the same thing for us, right? Like I did this session yesterday at Inside Out on Tuesday morning, and one of the women was talking, and she said, she always felt it, right? She didn't go to a Jewish school, and she didn't necessarily grow up in a religious home, but she always felt deeply connected to Judaism. Why? Because for whatever reason, her parents had done a great job of giving her that identity that you are a Jew, right? Like if she's asked, like she said, that there was in school, like she was always known as the Jewish kid. Right? Why? Because it was part of her identity. And that is I think, something that obviously, if you're a parent, that's something that you want to instill in your child. But if, the fact that you're here and you're listening, it shows that we have to identify ourselves in it, right? Yes, there is that part of doing Judaism and which is ever so important, but there's also that part of knowing that pride in being a Jew. And Rav Hutner was saying that that's the most important thing, right? Is to remember, is to know, is to feel it deep within your gut that I am a Jew, right? That is part of my identity. I look in the mirror, and what do I see? I see a Jew who's eternally a Jew, and who's always a Jew. And yes, there are times where I feel more spiritually connected and times where I perhaps feel less spiritually connected, but it's immutable that I am a Jew. So I'm gonna throw it open to you to leave you off with a question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. How do we instill that pride in Judaism in ourselves? Let's not talk about the kids, because it's or if you want to talk about kids, you can. Whatever's easier way to answer. Sometimes it's easier to blame it on the kids than talk about ourselves. But how do we do it? If it's about ourselves or it's about our kids, how do we get that
showing joy in things that you do, like making everything fun, like Friday night dinners and Shabbos meals, and making them, getting the kids excited like, oh, it's Friday night tonight, that all like preparate, like
and I think that goes back to what Yael was saying, is finding the joy in it, right? And I think we can't fake it, right? So it starts by, we're talking about the kids, but it starts by us finding the joy in it, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I think it's a challenge to us that, if we find the joy, great. If we're in a place where we're not finding the joy, then we have to sort of ask ourselves, like, what can I do? You can only fake it for a short time, though. What can I do to find the joy in it, right? Like how can I tweak things? And I think because, we have a lot more agency to be able to find the joy in Judaism. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. You can get in touch with me. You can find me on Instagram. It's Gila Ross. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Thank you and have a wonderful day.